So this is the Smart Families presentation talk on EdTech for school leaders and principals. And my name is Hillary Caceres. I'm the executive director here at Smart Families. I'm going to be introducing my team here on the call as well. But again, I just want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. This is something here to help support your school, support your community, and it will be recorded. So anything that you see here today, we will be sharing with you in probably a couple of days, maybe even a week. We'll send you an email with a link to the recording. And what we'll be walking through today is the EdTech document that's located on our website. And I don't know if Douglas, if you wouldn't mind sharing a link to that in our chat. We do have an EdTech page on the Smart Families document with a PDF download, which we'll be walking through specifically today, which will be helpful for you in the future, just so you know that's where it exists. So again, my name is Hillary Caceres. I'm the executive director. And I'd love to quickly introduce my other team members who are on the call. Ashley, you want to get started?
Sure, I'm Ashley Hartman. I am an implementation coordinator for Smart Families. So I'm in charge of having events planned and communicating with principals and parents and scheduling talks for students and getting to know the community and seeing how we can best support them.
Hi, I'm Douglas Matus. I'm the marketing person, editor, and I'm developing some online programming for us here at Smart Families. And I'm really excited for this talk. We put a lot of research into this, and we're excited to share it with you today.
And both are teachers, former teachers, so they have experience living in the classroom in today's world. So really helpful to have that insight. So we will cover in our presentation today the current research, recommendations, and practical strategies. So we want to lay a little bit of a foundation as to why we're here talking about this. Then we want to specifically leave you with a list of things that you can try and do at your school. And all of what we did today, what you'll see in this document, we had the opportunity to work with our local diocese here in Houston, Galveston, which was a beautiful blessing to ensure that we aligned well with an overarching organization that works with schools, obviously in many capacities. And so one of the things that was suggested to us is at least walk away with one thing that you plan on doing. If you see 25 things today and you're overwhelmed and you're thinking, gosh, this is just too much, start with one. And hopefully you do find that one today that speaks to you, but we're here to support you for the long term or short term or whatever it might be. Please lean on us, as this is something that we're very passionate about. So you're a Smart Families school. You know our norms, you know what we specialize in. We are in over 115 schools right now in the United States. We're in England. We just signed up an enormous school in Colombia with 3,000 plus schools. So this mission is growing. And really what we found over the last year or so is, thanks to sort of the conversations that are happening on the grander scale out in the world about technology and smartphones, that people are really embracing our norms. But then about a year ago, we started hearing from a lot of parents and some principals and teachers who then felt a little bit of a conflict. And they love what they were hearing from Smart Families, all of the research. And then they started asking, well, what do we do about the devices our children are getting from school? You know, we're giving iPads out to second graders. They're giving one-on-one devices such as Chromebooks. And we felt a little bit of a disconnect in the support that we were offering. And so we spent a lot of time putting this document together. And truly, I hope you hear the goal is to help support you in this very, very enormous, I guess you could say, potential change in your community. So to be clear, EdTech versus Tech Ed, I know it's very simple. I just want to make sure in reference to what we talk about today, EdTech, that's going to be Google Classroom, IXL, Kahoot. These are the programs that the children are using in order to learn a specific skill or a subject. tech ed is more about learning technology itself. I love to give the example of Canva as well. Canva is a really simple, lovely program. Students can learn graphic design. Often you see tech ed done in a computer classroom, a computer lab, or during a special computer period. I know all schools don't all have computer labs, but we want to make sure there is that very distinctive line between ed tech and tech ed. We know technology is also not going anywhere, so we want the children to learn these tools. But let's take a look at some of the tools that are being used. In 2018 and 2019, in the United States, per district, there were about 851 ed tech tools being used. We saw a really huge jump in 2019 and 2020 to roughly 2,100 tools that were used per district. We can thank COVID because of that. We knew schools all went online, and so they needed more tools to support that shift. But what we did not see is a decrease back down to those original numbers. In fact, we've continued to see increase year over year. And then we saw an additional pretty decent jump between 2024, 23-24 into 24-25. And what we can assume is that's been the use of AI now in education. Let's quickly peek at some of the numbers. We know EdTech is an enormous investment, not only financially, which you can see here, but it's also a huge investment in time. EdTech has been a really huge selling point for a lot of schools. It's an attraction. Parents want to know that their children are going to learn the best technology and they'll stay up with the time. And you're not alone. Look here, you can just see about $30 billion was spent in the United States alone for K through 12 education. And that number is expected to double by 2033. Here's a quick, I'm going to press pause. With all of that investment in time and money, I think the expectation was very high in assuming we would see, on general, as a whole in the United States and globally, an increase in our academic knowledge and growth and our testing scores. But unfortunately, what we're starting to learn now, we have enough research that's saying that's just not happening. And so this is a 3-minute video that I want to share with you. This was a testimony done on Capitol Hill by a neuroscientist, and it kind of speaks directly to what we are seeing here with some of the issues. So you can hear me.
For math, I'm a former teacher turned neuroscientist who focuses on, and I do not receive funding, nor have I ever from big tech. So a sad fact our generation has to face is this. Our kids are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. Since we've been standardizing and measuring cognitive development since the late 1800s, every generation has outperformed their parents. And that's exactly what we want. We want sharper kids. And the reason for this largely has been school. Each generation spends more time in school. We use school to develop our cognition. Congratulations, you see your cognition. Until Gen Z. Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure we have, from basic attention to memory to literacy to numeracy to executive functioning to even general IQ, even though they go to more school than we did. But why? What happened? What happened around 2010 that decoupled schooling from cognitive development? Schools basically look the same. It can't be biology. This hasn't had time to change. The answer appears to be the tools we are using within schools to drive that work. Across 80 countries, as Gina was just saying, if you look at the data, once countries adopt digital technology widely in schools, performance goes down significantly. To the point where kids who use computers about 5 hours per day in school for learning purposes will score over 2/3 of a standard deviation less than kids who rarely or never touch tech at school. And that's across 80 countries. Bring it home to the US. Let's go to the US. We have our NAEP. That's our big data. Take any state. Here's a fun experiment. Try. Take any state NAEP data. Compare that to when that state adopted one-to-one technology widely. Watch what happens. NAEP data will plateau and then start to drop. Now, as Jean said, of course, this is all correlative. What we really want is causative. To get causation, what you need is academic research mechanisms, explanations for why we're seeing what we're seeing. Luckily, we have academic research stretching back to 1962 that shows the exact same story for 60 years. When tech enters education, learning goes down. In fact, one of the biggest ed psychologists right now, Dylan William out of the UK, recently said, ed tech is a revolution that's been coming for 60 years. We're going to have to wait another 60. Now that's research, but now we need mechanisms. Luckily, over the last about 2 decades, we've been doing a lot of work called science of learning. How do human beings learn? But now have the clear understanding of why tech does not work in learning. It is all biological. It's not that the tech isn't being used well enough, we haven't been trained enough, we need better programs. It's we have evolved biologically to learn from other human beings, not from screens. And screens circumvent that process. I won't go too deeply into the mechanisms, they can get boring. Just know they're there if you want to talk about them.
So that's obviously a challenge to hear, I would say, as schools has invested, like we said, so much time and money into it. I think the core piece here is technology is not going anywhere. And we know we need to see some change. If you're on this call, it's been something you've been pondering, perhaps it's been brought to you by somebody in your community. But the key piece is going to be the intentionality and how the technology is used. And we're going to drill that down to a very specific recommendation here today, where you're not getting rid of it. We're really going to focus on some details of how it's being used and how we can improve the EdTech pieces that you've already incorporated into your community. So that being said, I'm going to pass this over to Douglas. We're going to leave you on a really positive note, although that video probably didn't leave you there. We're going to leave you on a really positive note. Douglas will walk through a little bit more of that research, which was referenced in this video, and then Ashley will leave you with some, like I said, specific tools that you can utilize in your school. So thank you.
All right, hi everyone. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can everyone see that? Yeah, okay. So like Hillary was saying, we're going to shift now from the big picture framing to the evidence. We just heard that neuroscientist speaking on Capitol Hill about the patterns that have been observed in regards to the cognitive development of this generation, Gen Z. That's the first generation to really be confronting the new reality of EdTech and technology that we're all living within now. So this section, the hidden costs of EdTech, is not going to argue that technology has no place in schools. What we are arguing is that technology has trade-offs, and those trade-offs matter when our goals are attention, learning, and healthy classroom culture. I'm going to briefly walk through the distractions across subjects, why more technology is not always better, what we know about laptops and note-taking, and then we'll move on to what school leaders can actually do. So the core idea is simple. Technology's presence in a classroom guarantees absolutely nothing. A device in the classroom is not automatically a learning gain. EdTech can absolutely help with access and engagement, but only when its use is purposeful, limited, and clearly tied to face-to-face instruction. When use becomes constant or loosely defined, in other words, when it's just kind of happening whenever, the risk is that we reduce comprehension, we reduce retention, and we reduce focus. So the leadership question is not, are we using tech? It's, are we using it intentionally? So digital distraction is probably the most obvious drawback of too much tech intertwined with education. One of the clearest themes in the research that we looked at is distraction. I'm going to speak more about these resources that we use, the references also at the end. But in PISA 2022, about 65% of students reported being distracted by their own device use in at least some math lessons. And students who were distracted scored 15 points lower in math, which is roughly 3/4 of a school year's worth of learning. So they're about 3/4 of a year behind students who were actively using devices to use math on learn math on a regular basis. That pattern is not limited to math, though. There's similar issues that show up in reading, and the underlying issue is divided attention. When your working memory is split between instruction and a digital input, kind of like how that neuroscientist was explaining we're biologically wired to learn from other human beings. So when your working memory is split between instruction and a digital input, the depth of your learning, it just drops. So when more isn't better, this slide gets at a very important leadership principle. More technology is not automatically better technology in schools. Across the OECD analyses, moderate use tends to outperform very frequent use. And if you look at the three graphs there, the bar graphs, the employment of ed tech in a classroom follows an inverted U pattern. If you don't have any of it at all, obviously there are little to no learning benefits, right? Limited benefit if underused. If you have a moderate use case of ed tech in a classroom where the use is intentional, it's designed, it's thoughtful, and it's consistent, you have moderate benefits to learning outcomes. But if you have too much ed tech, pretty much all the research that we looked at, if the ed tech is not used intentionally, if it's overwhelming, if it's constant, and if it's pervasive, it's very frequent, your learning outcomes actively come down from the integration of ed tech. So this means that our job is not to maximize screen use, it is to define where technology is essential and where it is helpful but optional, and where it is simply getting in the way of learning. So one especially striking finding comes from a randomized control trial that was done at West Point. So even in an extremely high discipline, high achievement setting like West Point, allowing laptops and tablets during lectures led to lower final exam performances from the students. That matters because if open devices can simply hurt performance just by being there, we need to be cautious about assuming that they're harmless anywhere. If the mere fact of having a laptop open on a desk at West Point was causing these students, these young adult students, to have actively lower grades, and you have to imagine what is that same device going to do to a high school student or a middle school student who doesn't have the executive functioning skills and the maturity that a college student at West Point of all places does to manage their attention. And let's see here. A very practical takeaway from this study would be that closed unless needed can be a powerful default norm for the classroom use of EdTech. Back when I was still teaching, it was commonplace in classrooms for students to have their laptops continually open at all times, unless the teacher specifically said, close your laptop. And then you had this dance back and forth of where you'd tell them to close their laptops. A few minutes later, they would magically open again, and you have to tell them again, close your laptops. And if you just create the campus-wide norm that the use of screens in class, whether it's an open laptop or a tablet or whatever it is specifically going to be defined by the teacher in the moment, that in itself can be a powerful culture change. The next thing we'll talk about is research around the cost of multitasking. It doesn't necessarily stay with the one student who is doing it. And that's an interesting, I'm sure that teachers will almost universally be able to attest to this phenomenon. In controlled lecture studies, students who multitasked on laptops scored lower on comprehension tests. But here's the really terrible thing. So did students who could simply see that someone next to them was multitasking. So distraction, it spreads around a classroom. If one student is distracted by their device, the students around that student are also going to be distracted by that first student's device. That makes device norms not just a behavior issue, but an instructional issue. It becomes difficult for a teacher to do their job if even one student is distracted by their one-to-one device. When screens are open without a clear reason, they change the learning environment for everyone in the room. This is one of the more practical findings for schools that we came across. Typing on a device tends to encourage fast, nearly verbatim transcription of what is being recorded. Handwriting, on the other hand, it slows students down just enough that they have to summarize, select, and make meaning from what they're recording. That deeper processing is what supports stronger comprehension and longer term retention among students. So this conclusion is not simple nostalgia for pen and paper either. It is a learning design issue. Sometimes the lower tech method is actually the more cognitively demanding and the more effective one. And we're seeing a lot right now at universities where lots of universities around the country, Ivy League to public schools alike, are moving away from laptop-based instruction and laptop-based exams, take-home writing. All of that stuff is going out the window, and a lot of universities are instituting in-class handwritten exams like I used to do when I was an undergraduate. We would do the Blue Book exams. Those are coming back, as are oral exams. As our classrooms were lectured during lectures, students are disallowed from having laptops present. They have to take notes with pen and paper. So when we say that note-taking declines with laptops, we're not simply harkening back to a simpler time when everyone's handwriting was beautiful and we all had attractive notebooks in our backpacks. It's a simple cognitive fact that the physical act of putting pen to paper helps with cognitive retention in a way that typing simply doesn't. And again, a simple change to make in the classroom just requires students to take notes during lecture instead of taking them on their laptop. And that's an incredibly valuable skill for them to develop if they're going to university where they might be expected to take handwritten exams. So this is an emerging area. The vestibular system is the collection of organs inside your inner ear that manage your balance, your spatial orientation. They help you coordinate your movement. But they also are connected to how we learn, our vestibular system. So I'm going to present this as a caution flag rather than a final word because this research is still kind of in development. The concern is that during long periods of screen-based stillness, movement variety gets reduced, and this affects systems that are tied to balance, body awareness, and coordination. And in classrooms, what can appear as a result of this is fidgeting, apparent inattentiveness, difficulty sustaining seated work, students who need to get up and move around, frequently. And also some teachers, I saw this in my classroom, students will literally fall out of their chairs for no apparent reason. And the effects on the vestibular system, which is still developing for younger students, it's more pronounced for younger students. And one implication is that movement in and of itself is not a break from learning. It's often part of what makes focused learning possible. And devices, they encourage stillness. They encourage stationary, lack of motor skill development, lack of physical movement, and that actually impairs the learning process too. The last thing I'm going to talk about before I'll hand it over to Ashley for the next part is this problem around EdTech apps sharing student data, the security issues presented by so many different apps. This slide shifts from learning effects to governance and trust. Many school apps are not just instructional tools, they are also data environments. As you can see here, 96% of applications, and you can see where this research came from in the download that we've provided for you. 96% of school-used applications share children's data with third parties. In addition to that, there are very high-risk SDKs. An SDK is a software developer kit. It is a kind of like a plug-and-play piece of code that a developer will put into their software in order to accomplish things that are kind of standard functionality, like, for example, a login portal or password security or something that transfers data from one portal across a variety of different apps like Google's suite of EdTech apps. SDKs are these developer kits that if you are an EdTech software developer and you want to build a math program that you want it to integrate with Google, you will use Google's SDKs to facilitate that. And the problem with SDKs is that they're basically a third party whose code is in a lot of EdTech devices or a lot of EdTech apps, and neither the developers of the apps nor the users really know what that third party component is doing. A lot of SDKs, the high risk ones that appear in 75% of school used apps. 56 of those were rated do not use by Internet Safety Labs, which we'll talk about who that is later, and 20% were related to high risk. And what makes those SDKs high risk is that it shows here on the screen. They often track and transmit things like geolocation, personal identifiers, things that can be shared with advertisers in order to target students as they travel around the internet. And a lot of school leadership aren't even aware of the security vulnerabilities that a lot of these SDKs and a lot of these applications that are used in schools present. So I'm going to stop there and hand it over to Ashley to pick up the next part. The next section, we're going to start looking at, instead of all of the problems with that tech, we're going to look at solutions, things that you can actively do both in the long and short term.
This part is the recommendations part. We pulled together 5 really simple and specific things that you can do to kind of make some changes and kind of reevaluate things. A lot of these things, you know, you can really embed into practices that you're already doing. So it's just 5 simple things I'll go over with you. And like Hillary said earlier, if there's just one thing that speaks to you, you know, maybe pick that one thing and focus on implementing that or kind of evaluating that as your takeaway. So the first one is conduct a formal EdTech policy assessment for clarity and alignment. The second one is run an EdTech audit. The third one is set defined hours of device availability. The fourth one is create an allow list instead of chasing banned sites. And the fifth one is dial back on gamified rewards. So I'll quickly go into these and kind of tell you what that looks like and get a little more specific with it. So for the first one, it's about conducting a formal EdTech policy assessment. So basically, this is just looking at your current policy that you already have and thinking about what does it say? Is it clear? And you can compare where your school is today and where you want it to go. So if there's something that you've been wanting to tweak or something you think needs adding into your policy, you know, it takes assessing it and looking down and looking at what is current and where do we want to be? What do we want to add? What do we want to take away? So does your policy have purpose, transparency, and guidance for teachers? These are some questions to consider. Is screen time incentivized? So is screen time used as a reward for certain behavior? Then you get screen time. Or is screen time incentivized in terms of you get a reward, such as extra recess or candy or treasure box if you complete blank number of online programs lessons. So kind of thinking about that. Is tech used as a time filler or during unstructured times? So what are the unspoken practices that need clarity and clear expectations? So those two kind of go together. So what are some things that are unspoken practices that we're not realizing in terms of maybe time fillers or unstructured time? So our screens used in aftercare or rainy day recess, or, you know, when there's a substitute. So it's a little less structured. So kind of just things like that to go over and kind of maybe get specific with your policy and add some things in and take some things out and just get specific there and just evaluate. It's worth evaluating to see. Those are the kind of unspoken things that might be happening that we don't realize. Okay, so the next one is going to be run an EdTech audit. So this is just about surveying teachers about their tech time and platform usage. You can pull reports on average daily tech time by age, when devices are in use, and commonly accessed sites. So questions to consider are, how is screen time being used in a classroom? What practical system lets teachers track tech time together so there is no daily overload? So I'm going to stop and talk about this one just for a minute. Just from being a teacher, I'm really thinking about practical strategies that, like I was saying earlier, you can embed into practices that you're probably already doing. So for an example, I think about how when a teacher schedules a test, they have to make sure that we don't schedule too many tests on one day. So some schools say, you know, the max amount of assessments per day for students can be 3. And so the way that teachers would track that for students who are switching classes is you would have a test calendar where the teachers would go in and put, you know, test on this day. Oh, I'm going to schedule a test on this day. Oh, I can't. There's already 2 teachers that are scheduled that day. So I'm going to move my test to another day. And so that was intentional, so that teachers, you know, wouldn't overwhelm the kids and plan all the science tech lesson or English tech lesson on this day. And then if you're looking at your planning and you're going to put this on the calendar, you would say, oh, wait, there's already 3 tech lessons that day. That's probably enough, because if you spend 30 to 40 minutes in a class period on tech, and then you rotate to the next class and rotate to the next class, then those students in that age group are definitely going over, if not meeting right up against their allotted tech recommendations for their age group. So that's a way that teachers can kind of track that together to ensure there's no overload. And then for lesson plans, could lesson plan templates include a section for intended tech use? I know teachers plan so well. They do backwards design planning. They plan so many things, and they look at objectives, and they plan for different learners. And so they're already kind of having to put these lesson plans together. And so, you know, could you add a piece that says, technology, you know, and which day would you put it on, and what is it being used for, and to kind of get teachers thinking about the intentionality of what is an intentional tech lesson versus a filler or something like that. So just kind of being mindful and adding in that tech time in there to see the big picture. And then should teacher training address this topic directly? So are the teachers knowledgeable of the recommendations of screen time per day? Are they knowledgeable of all the benefits of handwriting and the science behind it and things like that? So those are just some things to consider. And then recommendation 3 is set defined hours of device availability. And so this means to keep school devices from interfering with sleep, consider establishing off hours. So questions to consider would be, do devices need to go home at every grade level? If so, at what age? What is the cumulative time spent on devices during the day, and is it age appropriate? So this one kind of ties into the previous one, to where, you know, how much time is spent during the day throughout each class switching, and then coming home and having still to be on that device, you know, reaching those time limit recommendations. Do your guardrails align with public health guidance on sleep needs across age groups? And who is monitoring time spent on school issued devices and when? So just considering those, maybe assigning a specific person on the team to monitor those and make that clear to teachers, families, etc. Clear off hours make expectations easier for schools, teachers, students, and families. So if it's an established thing that, you know, our off hours are from this time to this time, then it just kind of, there's no guessing, there's no, this is too much, this is too little. It's just this is what we're doing, and this is why. So I think that would be a good recommendation or easy step to take if devices are going home at certain ages. And then the next one is create an allow list. And so default allow lists reduce distraction and exposure, simplify teaching, and strengthen security. This approach is consistent with allow listing principles in cybersecurity and with school filtering standards. So basically what this is saying is to consider allow lists maybe by age, by grade level band, by ages, and then to revisit these allow lists as new research, school needs, and student patterns emerge, and to do this regularly instead of reacting one side at a time. So kind of, I hate to say getting ahead, because with technology and it's constantly evolving, you really can't get ahead, but just in terms of kind of say, okay, we're gonna allow these sites and we're gonna reevaluate every couple months or what weeks or however your school wants to do it, and kind of get together and see what, you know, if there's any issues and what needs to be addressed or whatnot. And then the last one is dial back on gamified rewards. So What we are seeing in practice is that game style points, streaks, loot boxes, and leaderboards can shift motivation towards external rewards instead of intrinsically and meaningful learning. And so what to watch for is attention can weaken when the designs lean on badges and competition rather than feedback. And students need feedback that's individualized, and from a human that they know. There's a relationship with that teacher and human, and so they're going to benefit from feedback that way versus points in a leaderboard and competition. Consider turning off gamified features and app settings when possible. I know some of the apps have settings that you can just take the gamified option off. And then watch for tech tantrums, mood shifts, or because a lot of times some of these gamified reward systems have the ability to have the student wanting more and more of the dopamine hits. And so you might see some of those tantrum type behaviors and mood shifts when they have to get off. And then self-pressure. Also, sometimes those leaderboard games with the rankings for the class, to see in front of everybody adds a lot of self-pressure on some students as well. So the ask is, have students created something or done something meaningful with the learning? So a lot of times we have Kahoots and Bookits and Quizlets and all these fun online games to review material, but the science shows that you need to do something with the material before you do something like that. So the problem is if one student creates the booklet or if a teacher creates the booklet, then the students aren't doing anything with that information. So they're not going to learn it as best as the person who created it. So just something else to kind of look for. And then Douglas is going to continue on with practical strategies.
Okay, so the good news is that schools, you don't have to solve everything all at once with EdTech. Two really strong starting points are structured use policies and movement breaks. Clear guidance for teachers about when devices should be open and when they should not be open helps reduce drift of students' attention. And then regular movement or sensory resets, especially for younger students, will help restore attentiveness. It'll help them regulate their emotions, and it will increase their readiness to learn. So as a former teacher, and I'm sure Ashley could speak on this too, EdTech made my job a lot easier. That doesn't mean it made me a better teacher, though. It's very easy when tools are available to come to rely on them as a crutch as a teacher, because to be frank, teaching is not easy. It's not an easy profession. And sometimes the best way to do something is not the simplest or the most straightforward, and there's always going to be a temptation among teachers to make their jobs easier, and to make use of these tools that are provided to them so that they don't feel as if they're wasting this opportunity that's been given to them, these resources that have been given to them. And a lot of teachers have not been trained on how to use EdTech. We do professional development when new tools are introduced, but at my school, we never had any kind of comprehensive training about when we should use EdTech at all versus when we should just interact with the student face-to-face or do an old-fashioned lecture or return to the type of teaching that I was doing like in 2005 versus the type of teaching that I was doing in 2020 or 2021. So again, giving teachers the guidance and the support that they need to understand how to use these tools and when it's appropriate to use these tools and when it's actually beneficial to the students, and not to always rely on them as a simple, I don't have time to write a lesson today, so I'm just going to throw something up on YouTube type response. That is a big temptation for a lot of teachers to deal with on a regular basis. And then the last three practical strategies we have are device-free note-taking, limiting multitasking opportunities, and then professional development. Handwritten notes, as I mentioned earlier, they support memory and the synthesis of information. Fewer open screens means less cognitive overload and less temptation to become distracted or to drift away from the task at hand. And then lastly, teacher training, we believe, should focus on strengthening instructional judgment when technology will truly improve learning in a specific instance, when it is neutral, and when it is going to actually get in the way of instruction. And the goal should always be for teachers, the goal should be not more platforms, but the goal is better teaching decisions. So pursue professional development that makes your teachers better teachers, period, not professional development that's simply giving them another EdTech tool. And lastly, I want to say a little bit about our references. So this presentation was grounded in a mix of authoritative organizations and peer-reviewed research. You can see on your screen there, a list of the different things we used. The references include the OECD and PISA. Those are both international assessment and analyses bodies. The CDC and AAP are government bodies, public health and pediatric guidance. CISA is the US federal cybersecurity guidance. And then the independent research organizations that we used are, the predominant ones are New American Internet Safety Labs. If you're curious about like what Internet Safety Labs is, for example, I didn't know who they were until I started doing this research. They're an independent research org. They specialize in actually testing apps and software for privacy and security risks. As anyone who has interacted with EdTech companies knows, a lot of the evidence or the data that you get that establishes supposedly how valuable a piece of EdTech is often given to you by the company that is selling it. And Internet Safety Labs is an independent organization that tests EdTech apps themselves for privacy and security risk. They conduct technical audits of SDKs, which I talked about earlier, trackers and data flows, and they publish all of their risk ratings for EdTech apps on their websites. Lastly, the peer-reviewed research that, scroll back up to this. So we have randomized and controlled studies. We have meta-analyses looking at motivation and reward principles, and some of our research, all of our research came from either these authoritative organizations or well-established journals, and there's some examples of the journals that we used. All of the citations we used are included on the references page, which is in the download that you were emailed and that we provide the link to at the beginning of this presentation. And if any of you want to review our resources or look at the data that we're basing these conclusions off of, we encourage you to do so. And we would love to have a conversation with you if you have any questions about that. And to wrap up, the last thing I want to talk about is, before we wrap up, I want to briefly mention this companion document that we created, and then we'll have a time for a Q&A. The companion document to this one that we're going over today is called Safer, Smarter EdTech. So if the EdTech for Schools document that we're all referencing right now, if that's the broad overview of this issue, the why, then our follow-up document, the Safer, Smarter EdTech, is the practical follow-through. We created a policy framework for how schools can use technology more intentionally, more selectively, and with stronger safeguards around attention, learning, and child development. The central idea of this follow-up document is very simple. Schools should move from maximum tech to minimum effective tech. That is our core conclusion. Use the fewest tools as possible for the shortest amount of time needed to accomplish a clear academic goal. So what makes this document useful is that it translates that philosophy into actual classroom standards. We lay out school-wide principles like phone-free classrooms during instructions, prioritizing paper for long or complex readings and major assessments, treating handwritten notes as the default in most contexts, keeping the app stack small, protecting teacher and family boundaries, and making data privacy a non-negotiable. This document also gets very specific by category and by age band. We give guidance for digital curriculum, quiz and review tools, creation and coding tools, family communications platforms, and AI tools. And it breaks all of those recommendations down from pre-K through high school. And one especially helpful feature is that this document has recommended time spans that are framed as maximum limits, not targets to hit in terms of one-on-one screen time. So if there's interest in something like that, we would love to come back and do a follow-up session focused entirely on this longer, more involved nuts and bolts document and what implementation of those standards could look like in practice. So if today was the overview, this document I'm speaking about now would be the implementation guide. And I'm going to stop there and hand it back over to Hillary.
All right, that was wonderful. Even though I worked on this document, I really always enjoy walking through it verbally again and again with the team. We're happy to take questions here. I see we have some interest in this document that Douglas was referring to. And so what we can do is share that with you. I will say, I think the best way for this document to be actually utilized is another conversation just as this. It's a lot. It's just a lot. That's the only way I can describe it, but very helpful tool. So thank you, Kaylin. We will follow up. My apologies if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. And then I see we have somebody asking a question, and I'll give them a minute to finish. Again, we will share the recording by email. And can we get the link? So we have a link to the document that we walked through today is on our website under the EdTech area, and I can share a link to that. And then the document, there we go. Thank you, Douglas. The document that Douglas just referred to at the end, we have not shared yet, but we can do so in a subsequent email. And then we will schedule another talk like this to walk through that document. I will say in the interim, please feel free to reach out to us. We have had already one call with a principal from another school who just wanted to walk through some of the areas of EdTech within their community. And I think it was very helpful just to hear from that individual some of the feedback that they had been receiving and then how we can customize our support. Douglas and Ashley and myself and the team, we do a lot of research on this on a daily basis. And so it should alleviate the strain that you're probably already experiencing with limited bandwidth and limited time. And there's just so much out there. So please lean on us if there's specific areas that you're most concerned about. If it's a specific actual EdTech tool that's causing you a problem, you can reach out to us about that as well. We can help walk you through potential, the gamification concept where IXL, we can go in and adjust those settings and to your IT director, whoever actually does the work there, and show them how to make those changes. We've worked with schools on implementing schedules where devices turn off at a particular time. They were finding this one community had kiddos going onto their Chromebooks a little bit later than they wanted. And so we're happy to do any of these things with you, either one-on-one or with another team member in your community. So great, sounds good. If there's no other actual questions, feel free to, again, reach out. We will share this recording. We will share the subsequent document that was referenced, and then we will schedule a follow-up probably in about 4 weeks. We'll see when the holidays land, and we'll go from there. But thank you all for joining. Good luck and blessings to you all.